Hey everybody, welcome. I am Romi Hill and I'm the designer behind Designs by Romi. And this is the fourth of my, well, actually fifth, but the second one was continued, so I'm still calling it one. This is the fourth YouTube live of my Summer of Lace knit along. And every Thursday through July 27th, I will be going on at 4 p.m. Pacific to just talk about lace and all the fun things about it, how to make your lace look amazing, and all sorts of stuff like that. Um, so there's a little bit of a delay, and I'm streaming out to you, and there's like maybe a 5 second delay before it gets to you. And then there's also a delay for your questions getting back to me. But if you ask me questions in the chat or say hello or whatever, I will definitely see it and I will respond. So welcome. I am so excited to be with you. It's a lot of fun. And actually, I was seeing somebody said that you wish that you could do this all the time. I'm actually thinking I might just keep doing this like every couple of weeks or something like that, and just answer your questions and kind of hang out with you and tell you what I'm up to, that kind of stuff, and then you can ask me whatever you want. So let's see over in the comments. Hi, everybody. So excited to see you. It's hot here too, so I am a lucky person with air conditioning, or my computer would probably blow up. So I'm feeling very fortunate right now. I hope that you're all keeping cool and staying dry, depending on where you are. So I'm just going to show you a sample, like the full size view of the sample that I will be showing you later on today. This is Celino, and it's one of my first designs. So I'm going to talk a little bit about special stitches that you might find in my patterns. And this one has a very cool stitch. It's Estonian, and I will show you up close what it looks like and how to do it. And this is heavily beaded. So for those of you who don't like random things, well, I don't know what to say. This is randomly beaded up top, so it's just supposed to look like a night sky. And then in the bottom, the beads are actually charted in the lace edging. So I actually have a friend who is an engineer who tried to chart random bead placement up in the top, and strangely enough, a charted randomizer doesn't look as random as your eye. So your eye will, like, I just put them in wherever I thought they looked good. And like when you do that type of thing, like the aesthetics of it, it actually works out better when you just do it according to where you think a bead should go. So try it. So I hope everybody will try that one. Let's see if I have any questions. Okay, so we're good so far. Alrighty, so I'm going to go over a few special stitches. So the first thing I wanted to do is talk about how to do the reverse stockinette I-cord bind off. And I have a little teeny tiny swatch worked up so you don't have to watch me knit forever. And I'm just going to show you how to do that bind off. And that is the bind off that you'll see at a lot of the tops of my shawls that are designed like a modern hat construction. So that would be like that pinhole cast on start in the inner triangle. And if you did my last mystery, which is over here, that's the way it started. And if you take a look up at the top, the bind off is a reverse stockinette I-cord. So I like to use that because it gives you kind of a thicker edge. and it allows you to have a nice drape, and it also blends really, really well into the fabric. So let me switch over here. Alrighty, so here's my tiny, tiny little swatch. So this is what it would look like if you were going to have just that inner triangle part of this. And I don't seem to be, my text to speech doesn't seem, sorry, not my text to speech, there we go. My speech to text didn't seem to be doing very well. So got it now. Okay. So here's my little tiny swatch. Here's where I started, right down at the bottom. And I have done yarn overs at the beginning of the rows to increase on either side there. So whenever I'm doing garter stitch like this, I always mark the front side here because I will always put it down and forget where I am and miscount. So let me just do a couple of rows here to refamiliarize you with what it is I'm doing. So I'm doing a yarn over at the beginning of every row, and that is shaping this into a triangle. And so some of these that I've designed that have the inner triangles, some of them are patterned and some of them are just straight garter stitch. So I just did this one straight garter stitch. So I could just show you what that looks like. So although I do like to, usually I like to work my edge stitches through the back loop. When I'm doing this, I don't because I like to keep these yarn overs open. So the yarn overs stay open in this particular construction. Sometimes you might want to close them up if you're not going to pick up stitches around the side, because you can use this actually as an increase for lots of different things. So you could be using this as an increase along the side, and then you could twist the stitch and just cover, kind of close up that loop there. But I wanted to leave these open. Okay. So let's take a look here. I know that this is the right side because I marked it here. I have my cast on loop marked, so I know where the center is. I always mark that just to make sure. So I have done 6 rows. And you can see along here, I have 3 yarn overs on this side, those loops on this side, and over on this side. So this bottom one here, that looks like a yarn over, but it's actually just kind of a loose stitch at the beginning of that row. The yarn over is up here on my needle. And so I just always kind of watch out for that little, that beginning of the row there. Okay, so when I do my reverse stockinette I-cord bind off, I always use a double pointed needle that's a little bit larger than my working needle, and that is so it'll be nice and stretchy. So the nice thing about an I-cord is that when you use that larger needle, you don't really have to worry about it flaring on the side because the I-cord gives you a much more stable edge. So you can, it can be a little bit looser than you might think. I'm just going to adjust my camera a little bit here. So I was sort of rushing around because Google decided to make me like sign in on all of my devices before it let me sign in to YouTube to go live. So I was having a little bit of a panic attack there and didn't fix my camera. Okay, so I'm going to do a 3-stitch reverse stockinette I-cord bind off. And When I start this out, just to make it a little bit pointier on the side, I always cast on 4 stitches. Just one little extra stitch to make it more triangular, like to make more of a point there. So I'm just going to cast those on with the knitted cast on using my double pointed needle. Okay, and I think that was 3, so here's 4. Alrighty, so the first thing I'm going to do is just start working these stitches. So I'm going to purl 2, and then I'm going to set up this whole I-cord bind off by purling 2 together. So each time I purl together, from now on, these purl 2 stitches together from now on, I'm going to be attaching 1 stitch from the I-cord to 1 stitch of the shawl. And now my yarn is going to come to the back, and I'm going to slip my stitches back over to my left needle. So now I have these 3 stitches here, and I'm going to bring my yarn around the back here and up and hold it so it's under the needle. And then my double pointed needle is going to come on top of this yarn, and I'm going to purl. So I'm going to purl 2 stitches and then purl 2 together. And those come off the needles. And now I'm going to scoot these back onto my left needle. So I'm going to show you what this would look like if I were holding the yarn in my right hand. So I brought this back around, and my needle still comes on top here and through to purl. And I'm just going to purl these 2 stitches and then purl 2 together. And my yarn needs to go back here before I slip these stitches back onto my left needle. Okay, so just gonna scoot along here a little bit quickly so I can show you what this looks like, what the tube looks like when you first start it, because it looks pretty sloppy. And it's easy to think that it's going to look terrible and you're doing it wrong, but you're probably not doing it wrong. It probably just looks messy. Okay, so let me turn this over and show you. That looks pretty messy. So you can just see these strands of yarn in the back. And then in front here, it doesn't look like much of anything either. So I have a question from Devoted to Knit, and yes, my pattern does call for for casting on those 4 stitches. So everything is all written into my patterns, and you don't have to edit them in that way. So wherever I can, I tell you my picky little details so that you can do them too. And that's actually one of the reasons that I decided that I was going to take a bunch of my patterns down and reformat them, because I started adding a lot, like as I was doing this for years and years, because I've been designing for over 15 years now. And I started adding in more of my little picky tips and tricks along there. And I want to make sure that they're in all of my patterns. I want to make sure everything's consistent. And so I'll be going back and sort of adding a bunch of stuff like that. Okay, so that's what it looks like. Doesn't look very good. Okay, but now I'm going to give it a tug. So see how that's just kind of like magic. It just all of a sudden, it starts looking nice. And you can see up top here, it gives nice stretch to it, but it's also really nice edge. And when you're blocking this, you can insert your blocking wire through the middle of it. Okay, so let's just finish this up and then I will show you how to pick up stitches around. So at the end of the row here on my patterns, you will notice that I close up the loop in order to kind of work the rest of the way around. So I will show you how that goes. And I'm just going to do, so on the first side, you'll notice that I made it a little bit more triangular. So over on this side, I'm also going to do that. I'm going to slip my stitches back here and bring my yarn back under one more time. And I want this stitch to go around to the back here. And this is also written into my pattern. So you don't have to remember what I'm saying here other than explaining why it's happening. So this stitch is going to go around to the back. I want to hide it so that this is going to continue along and it's going to be a 2-stitch edging when I start working down. So these first two I'm going to knit together and then I'm going to knit one through the back loop. Okay, so let's take a look at the side here. I'm going to be picking up 3 stitches in this side. So remember I was talking about how down here, that yarn over is not really a yarn over. It's really just kind of the loose, sloppy stitch at the beginning of this row here. And the real yarn over is up at the top here that just kind of got knitted into, but that's the actual yarn over right up at the top here. So I'm going to be working into this. So my rule in lace is if you're wondering how many stitches to put in there, put more in there and it's easier to decrease out later. So when I pick up stitches, I like them to look nice and uniform all the way around. So I like to pick up a stitch in each like yarn over or wherever, and I'm going to add yarn overs in between each of these. And then later on, most of my patterns tell you to decrease some of those stitches out. And that is just so it looks uniform and it looks like lace faggoting across, like along the side here. So I wanted that to be nice and uniform. So that's why the extra yarn overs. And really, I should actually have had that on my working needle, but I had it on my double-pointed needle accidentally. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is a yarn over. And then this is super simple. I'm just going to be picking up stitches in these yarn overs along the side. I'm going to skip this sloppy stitch here, and that will kind of block out later as long as I don't knit into it. Okay, so here is my center. So I'm going to do a yarn over, and I always like to put stitch markers around the center stitch. And that's just to kind of keep track of where I am. So you don't have to do it. I just like to do it so I can tell at a glance when I'm coming to the middle stitch. And now I'm going to work a stitch into that cast on loop here that I had marked. And this is still pretty loose, but as a last step in a shawl, I always adjust that a little bit tighter and make it blend more into this area here. So I'm going to leave my pin there. You can really take it out if you want because you've marked the center stitch. Okay, now I'm going to go up the other side, and I'm just going to pick up a stitch in each one of these yarn overs. And this is pick up and knit. So I pick up and knit. So let me just as an aside, this is pick up. So specifically that's pick up when you just pick up a loop onto your needle. This is pick up and knit, where you actually knit a stitch into that loop. And we have someone from Germany. That's exciting. Hi. Okay, so I'm going to do one more yarn over, and then on the side here, I just want to make this look as good as possible. I'm gonna just pick up 2 stitches from the side, and I'm going to work those through the back loop so it closes up and it makes it look neater. And there we go. So I have those 2 stitches worked through the back loop. So here is what we have. And this little tail here from the cast on is going to help to adjust later on. After the pattern is finished, it will help adjust the cast on loop so it looks more like all of these other little yarn overs alongside here. Okay, so just wanted to show you that. And let me just going to grab my swatch here. I did a big swatch. I had a question from somebody, and this was on Fiore di Sole, I believe. And they were asking about me using SK2P at the top of a motif. So in other words, like up at the top of a motif like this, I'd use an SK2P. So in this particular motif, it looked more like this. So you would have decreases coming up the side here and into this SK2P. And she was saying that she thought it didn't look symmetrical and she thought that it was a mistake. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about this because a lot of times you can take a look at symbols on a chart, and when you look at them, they don't look symmetrical, but when you look at the actual knitted fabric, it does look symmetrical. And sometimes when you look at, so if you take a look at this, I marked them, so I marked where all of my markers are in here. When you take a look at this, these are all 8-stitch repeat. They all use the same number of stitches and the same number of decreases, but they look completely different when they're knitted up. And that is because of all of these directional decreases in here. So I decided just to do this swatch that is going to look a little funky, but I think a bunch of you, like me, um, I think we share that sort of wanting to know how things are going to look exactly and wondering why they look that way, and some fascination with how something can look so different in lace when you just change a couple of stitches. So this is one of my favorite patterns to play with because you can do so many things to change it. For instance, this lozenge right here and this one. So this one has SK2Ps stacked, and this one has centered double decreases stacked. So some people call these S2K2P. I try not to call them that because I think it's really easy to think you're saying SK2P. So I call these a CDD, center double decrease, in hopes that it's more obvious what it is. Okay, so I knit up this big swatch, and we're just going to take a look at how different some of these increases, some of these decreases will make your fabric look. Okay, so first, let's take a look over here. So this right here is usually how I would do this pattern. So it's kind of like a leaf pattern, a leaf motif. So Marianne asked, can your pattern be made wider and longer by extra repeats? So yes. So, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So yes, I could make this wider and taller. So this is how I would usually do this motif here. So I often use often use knitting through the back loop to make yarn overs tidier. But in this particular case, because it's a leaf motif, I like to leave that edge kind of more feathery, so it looks more natural. Once in a while, if I want it more shaped, I will work through the back loop here. But this is usually how I would use it. And I like these SK2Ps up at the top here because I think it just gives it sort of a more organic, natural feeling to it. So that's what I started with, and then I started just playing around with different ways that this can look. So let's first take a look at this one over right here, this one right on the side here. So this one is a more geometric. This is a diamond pattern. So for a diamond pattern like this, I like to make the bottom here knit through the back loop because it looks more geometric and crisp. And that is what it would look like on a chart. So it uses these directional stitches here, and the lines of stitches go up into an SK2P. And you can see how crisp that looks across here because this line of stitches goes straight up into the SK2P, and it's continuous with that really nice line of stitching. Okay, so in answer to that question about the center double decrease and why wouldn't I use that when that would be more even. So this is what a center double decrease looks like when you're working with that same diamond motif. So instead of continuing the line of stitches from either side here, the middle column is the stitch that comes out on top. And so that line of stitches is broken along the side. So I don't use that unless I'm trying to get a particular look to it. And you'll see further on the look that I'm talking about. But you can see here that actually looks more crisp, and it does actually look even and centered. So even though that one, oops, I'm not even, hang on a sec. I just got a message from my son in the middle of my live. Oh my goodness. So You can see right in here, that center, and take a look over on this side. This is nice and centered there. And that one, not so much. Okay, so moving on here, and this is going to be like really weird, but I actually have to tell my husband something at the moment because my son is stranded without gas money. The trials and tribulations we go through. So there we go. Alrighty, all done. Hopefully, like all the trouble has been averted. You never know, though. Yeah. Okay, so where were we? Let's take a look over here. Okay, let's take a look over here. And we have this stack right along here. So I did a stack of centered decreases. So compared to the stack of SK2Ps. So here are the centered decreases, here are the SK2Ps. So we're looking at that before. Here are the SK2Ps. And here is what it looks like with a stack of centered decreases. So you can see that's another type of look. So that also looks like a leaf. It also looks nice and organic, and it has kind of a stem coming out of it here because the center decreases are stacked. So then when you get up to the top here, that top CDD actually looks correct. So whereas over here, when we were looking at that, it did not look correct there. Over here, it looks really nice because it's a continuation of that directional stitch. So that column going straight up here. So I'm just going to check and make sure everybody is doing okay over in the comments, just to make sure. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to get into some ones that I don't really think are all that successful. So over here, there are other ways that you can do decreases. So they don't have to go down the middle and they don't have to go up the side. So sometimes you don't want that directional stitch along the side here. So instead of following the direction of the knitting here, and on this side, you can do it reversed. And this actually works a lot better for garter stitch because it creates a really low profile and you don't see those directional stitches so much. So it just comes out as just that purely, like that purely solid area in here. And it's very hard to see these decreases. Okay, so let's take a look at what that looks like. So here is what it looks like here. And this is what it looks like with a centered double decrease up at the top. And over here, this is what it looks like with an SK2P up at the top. So again, not entirely in love with this look for just plain stockinette. or this look for that matter, and just plain stockinette. But I do really like it in garter stitch. Okay, so moving on over to this area here. So Barb, thank you. Everything is totally fine. It's just that I put stuff on the schedule, like on the family schedule, and my son never looks at it. So he's like, so my son had long COVID. Okay, so I'm just gonna transition back here, like personal moment. My son had long COVID and he has been like he had to leave college. It took over a year for him to recover. And he's actually like, it was slow and slow and slow and slow. And then one day, practically, like he woke up and he's himself. So he really didn't want to go back to college, and he thinks he might want to be an electrician. So he got a job locally, and he is like, this was his first week, and so he's like trying to kind of get used to, doing his own thing and all of that. But so yeah, I'm pretty excited that he's feeling better and like he feels like he's up to it. And so far, things look pretty good. So, fingers crossed. And so, yeah, end of the personal moment. So, back to lace. Alrighty. So, let's just check here. Yes, Jenny, you were saying, and May, you were saying the differences. Yes, it is really interesting what these all do. Um, so over here is my last scheme there. So that is this one right here. So over here, I put the decreases right next to the edge. And over here, I moved them inside so that there would be a little bit of a spine here. And then I have two types of double decrease. Here is my SK2P, and here is my center double decrease. So this is what it looks like with my little spine here. So my SSK is a little bit messy, and we'll talk about SSKs just a little bit later in this live. So that's what the one with the CDD looks like. And I don't like this. This is kind of what happens when I go through swatching. This is the type of thing um, that I do. I look at all the types of different decreases and how they're going to look. I don't really like that. But over here, this is what an SK2P looks like with those two um, columns of decreases here. And I don't really like that either, to be honest. I think that it would look better in a larger lozenge. So, and that sort of brings me to Marianne's question before about how you would make this larger. So this is a really easy one to make larger just by adding a stitch on either side. So in other words, if I wanted to make this um, a 10 stitch wide repeat, I would add a stitch column on either side here, and then there'd be an extra 2 rows on the bottom here and an extra 2 rows up at the top here. So one extra increase at the bottom and one extra decrease at the top. So this particular one is really easy to edit if you are inclined to kind of be looking through stitch books and stuff like that. This type of motif is very easy to edit. So it can be as big or small. Well, it can get maybe a little tiny bit smaller, but it can get huge. So and let's see. Just checking over here. Okay. Alrighty then. So I'm going to work this row up at the top here. I have my chart in my chart keeper here, and this is a magnetic strip across here. So I'm just going to work this across, and I'm going to show you what happens when you come to a double decrease next to a repeat line. So first, let's talk a little bit about where I place my markers. Um, I place my markers along repeat lines. But the thing about placing markers is that when you're looking at a row of symbols like this row of symbols represents what your knitting is going to look like when you have finished this entire row. So if you're looking over here, um, if you take a look over at the side, there's a yarn over and an SSK, a yarn over SSK. So that is even. So there's one increase and there's one decrease. If you take a look over here, decrease, increase. If you look right here, that's one increase and two decreases. So what happens when you come to this? So that this repeat right here is going to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stitches, not 8 stitches. So when you come to a double decrease like this, right next to that repeat line, you're going to need to borrow a stitch from the next repeat. And same with this CDD, because that is a double decrease right next to a repeat line. Over here, it's not going to be the same because this is just a single increase and a single decrease over here. So this right here, this is kind of interesting because when you look at it, you need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stitches for this piece of the chart. Over here, you needed 9 stitches. I'm sorry, back over here, you needed 9 stitches. Over here, this one is balanced. So you need 8 stitches. And over here, you need 7. But they're all going to look, when you get finished with this, you're going to have 8 stitches between each one of your markers here. So let's get started on this, and you can see this in practice. So at the top there, that first part is pretty simple. So let me just put this here so I can actually see it while I'm knitting it. Okay, so I'm going to do 3 stitches, work through the back loop, and then knit 2. Oops, try not to drop too many stitches here. Knit 2, and then I have 1 knit through the back loop and a yarn over. So this is going to be an SSK, and when I do an SSK onto a solid like this right here, so this is solid fabric, I like to slip one. I slip it knitwise, and I'm going to put it back onto my left needle and then knit 2 together through the back loop. So what that does is the front stitch here is not twisted, but the bottom stitch is twisted. And for some weird reason, that makes my SSKs lay better. So SSK is notoriously janky looking. So if you take a look kind of over in this area. Let me find a good place. So you can see some of the sloppy stitches here. A lot of that will block out, but a lot of times an SSK just is going to come out looking weird. It's just the nature of the stitch. I'm trying to find one where so here's my trick sort of in use for that nice straight row of SSKs. So often, let me just back out of this and show you, like an SSK. I write an SSK like slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, and then put both stitches back onto your left needle, and you're going to work them together. So that's how the SSK is written. And I write it that way because not everybody is the same, and it's particularly true with SSKs. For some reason, um, that stitch looks so different for everybody. So I do actually have a tiny tutorial that shows different types of SSKs, and it is in our playlist for this Summer of Lace. And I highly recommend going through and taking a look and seeing which one works best for you, because you'll find one based on like the angle that you use, that you hold your needles and your knitting style. You'll find one that works the best for you. Okay. So here's my short version of that. I go in as if to knit around the back and through the back loop of that second stitch. And that's my favorite SSK. Okay, so let me slip that marker, and here's my knit two together. And over on this one, I didn't do any ones to the back loop. So here I'm going to come up to my stacked SK2P. So this is what it looks like here. I'm right next to my marker there that I've placed along the repeat. Okay, so I'm going to show you my little trick because I don't like taking my markers out. Okay, I'm going to knit around this marker, and you can do this with any marker. I've tried it with all sorts of different markers. This one is a particularly small and light one, but you can do it even with ones that hang down. So I'm going to slip a stitch as if to knit, and then I'm going to knit two together around the marker. So I didn't put my needle through this marker. I'm just knitting two together. Oops. And I'm not taking these stitches off of my needle. I'm coming over here and I'm going to pass my slipped stitch over. So those two stitches are still on there. Now I'm going to stick my needle through. And I actually somehow knitted my stuff in there this time. Probably because, that's just the way it goes with live stuff. But let me show you this again. And this time I'll pay more attention. Alrighty. It's hard to do magic when one is having a day. All right, so slip a zip to knit. And I'm going to knit these two together. Pass that stitch over. And there we go, through my stitch marker. So that's how I do it. Let me just go on over to the other side here. And I have a CDD over here. So I'm right here again. So this is the one, so this repeat right here took 9 stitches because I was basically setting up this whole area here. This one is going, you can see it looks balanced across there. It takes 8 stitches, but because I only had 7 stitches left after borrowing one from over here, I have to borrow another one from over on this side. And that is going to work out. So I'm going to borrow a stitch again with the CDD. And I'm just going to check and make sure I'm not missing comments. Okay. So Marianne, you were saying, I see many of your shawl patterns I would like to lengthen for a taller person. Okay, so alrighty, hang on, switch for a moment here. Okay, so as far as lengthening shawl patterns, what I showed you is not probably the way that you want to lengthen them. So a lot of my shawl patterns are repeatable. In other words, as you're working all of your, as you're working the charts, you'll find that there's a chart that's worked over and over again. And more towards like my later designs, I started doing this more and more and more. Um, there's a chart in there that's going to be that I'll say maybe work 4 times, work 5 times, or whatever. So that means you can just go back and keep working that chart over and over. And there's also an ebook, Resizable Shawls, and that one in particular has all sorts of different sizes and ways to increase the size of the shawls. But in general, what you want to do is repeat the chart more times. You'll, of course, need more yardage, but you're going to repeat the chart extra times to make the shawl larger. And then once you have added those repeats, the next chart, of course, will have extra repeats like within the row. The repeat will be longer. There will be more of them, in other words. So maybe you repeated a chart an extra time, and like you repeated the entire chart an extra time, and then when you're going back through it again, you come to the next chart. So when it says in the column, like repeat this column, work it 5 times, you may have to work it 6 times or 7 times. So that's the way you would want to enlarge the shawls. And for some of them, there are larger sizes. So like for my former lace club shawls, there is a larger size included, like a tall size. So longer, wider, just larger. So, so there are lots of ways that you can do that. So I hope that helps. Okay, let me go back here. Alrighty, so I was over at the CDD right here. And here we go with this one. It's basically the same concept. So this time with the CDD, the idea is to get this center stitch on top. So that means my needle is going to have to go through that stitch first. So unlike the SSK where you're like slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, that's not what you're going to do with this one because you want this second stitch here to come out on top. So your needle is going to go through that one first and slip both of those together as if to knit. And now I'm just going to knit that stitch on the other side of my marker, and I'm going to leave my marker and the stitch on my left needle. I'm going to pass both of those stitches over and then get the marker on. And that is my CDD. You can see that middle stitch ended up on top, so that column works. And let's see. Okay, just checking over in the comments. Alrighty, so let's go on here. Onward over to the side. So those are fairly simple. Okay, so here we are over at the other side. So right here we just needed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stitches in here because you can see that there are 2 increases and only 1 decrease. But remember, we borrowed a stitch from this area right here. So that's exactly right. We should have set those 7 stitches right there. Okay. So let's grab over here and knit 2 together, knit 1. And I'm just going to continue on. So I'm going to do my little SSK trick. So some people, instead of doing an SSK, like to do a knit 2 together through the back loop. So I used to be really opposed to that because it twists the stitch. And I was like, oh my God, that's terrible. But in reality, some people's knit 2 together through the back loop actually looks better. So it's one of those things again, choose the one that looks right for you. So a knit 2 through the back loop would be to knit 2 together through the back loop. It would be just like this. So you can see at the bottom, it twists the stitch. So it doesn't really look the same as a knit 2 together. So that is why I don't like to use it. I like to use a mirror image, but I mean, knitter's choice. I want to give you all the information and then you get to take it all, take what you want and leave what you don't want. Okay, so what I like to do is just my favorite SSK. And just going to continue on right across here. So this is kind of an interesting thing when you see stacked decreases like this. Even though that looks like it is leaning to the right, this is going to look like a column of stitches. This is going to be like a straight column of stitches here. And the idea is for that column of stitches to be unbroken over the top. And that's when you see these stacked like that. And so let me show you what that looks like in my swatch here. So you can see how this column is straight here and the stitches are coming, it looks like they're coming underneath and that one column is on top here. So that's what that looks like. Even though they look directional, you can actually use directional stitches to make something look straight like this. Let's see. So Leslie said Patty Lands has a modified CDD where she slips the first 2 stitches, puts them back on the left needle, and knits all 3 through the back loop. I don't personally use that just because I'm happy with the way mine looks. But if that works better for you, I think, yeah, go for it. I actually think it's, for me personally, I have more problems knitting 3 together through the back loop than passing the 2 over. But Patty and I have different knitting styles. So, and uh, you probably have a different knitting style too. So I am totally in favor of whatever works best for you is what you should use. And I think you should try all of the tricks that everybody shows. So, and Patty is an awesome teacher. So definitely try all of her tricks that she shows because she's great. So yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to do my knit two together here and moving along. And my favorite SSK again. Stick that in through there. And I just threw in a noop in here just for fun, um, just to show what it looks like when you have to do one next to a repeat here like this. So this is a 5-stitch noop. So I'm just doing my 5 stitches in there. So I think the scary part with a noop next to a repeat line is what it looks like on the reverse side. Because as you're coming back to it, you're going to see all of those stitches right next to your marker. And sometimes it's easy to panic a little when you see all those stitches just sitting there. And on your chart, it doesn't look like they're there, but you're just gonna purl them all together. And now you're back to 1 stitch. Okay, so yeah, so basically that's that. I just wanted to show you all the amazing things that you can do just by changing all of your decreases. And of course, wanted to show you my little marker trick. That's the important part. Okay, so a few little things. I'm just going to take my Franken swatch here. A few of the things that I wanted to talk about, like a few special stitches that you might find in my stuff. So here's that really pretty Estonian stitch from my Solino shawl. I really love this stitch. I think it's so beautiful. The Estonians have some of the most gorgeous and interesting stitches. So this one, you can see here, it's quite interesting looking. So Marianne, you asked what the name of the SSK is. It's just SSK. They're just basically tricks to do what is a slip knit and make it look better. So I definitely suggest going and taking a look at my little tutorial on all the different kinds. You will hopefully find one that fits best for your knitting style. Okay, so if you take a look up here, this is a really interesting stitch. You can see it's like a little gather stitch. So below here, there are 3 stitches and they get gathered right here. And then on top, 7 stitches come out. So I just want to show you how to do that because I know some of you are doing Solino. Okay, so you're just going to be knitting into 3 stitches. So when you do that little gathering stitch, you're going to stick your needle through all 3 of the stitches as if to knit them together. And then you are going to work 7 stitches in here. So a knit, yarn over, back in here, It's almost like working a loop, like setting up a loop through three stitches. So we're at three, four, five, six, and then the seventh one. So sometimes easy to catch a little piece of yarn. Okay, so what you're going to end up with is something that looks like this. So you have at the bottom here, I think part of that was off of the screen, so let me make sure you can see that. So I'm just going to go through the three stitches, knit, yarn over, knit, yarn over, knit, yarn over, and knit. So once you have all of those 7 stitches on your needle, then you can pop those other 3 off. You can see here you've worked all through those 3 stitches there, and you have 7. So it's gathered them together, and then you can start from there. So let's see questions. Um, hmm. So Barb asked, I am looking forward to using beads in my knitting. Is there a rule of thumb to know where to add beads in a pattern that doesn't call for them? There isn't really. I mean, it is completely knitter's choice. Although I can say, like sometimes you might want to replace a noop with a bead. That's a good place. For a motif like this, I would stick a bead at the point up here. So in other words, work that SK2P and then bead the stitch that comes out of that. So that one stitch would have a bead on it. If you like lots and lots of beads, you could bead each one of these. So really like, knitter's choice when you look at it. It's totally your taste. I sometimes put beads in my bind offs because that actually weights the bind off nicely. So like beads and picots are really nice. Um, yeah, so play with it. Do a swatch, see what you think of where you put the beads. I know that's, I know lots of people don't like to swatch, but I love, I love to swatch. It's fun to see them. Let me see other questions. Okay. Okay, we're good. Okay, so that is that little Estonian flower thing. And I often also use something similar to that. And so let me just take the stitch marker out. Similar, very similar to that, but it only has 3 stitches instead of the 7 coming out of the 3. So I would just go through here, knit 1, yarn over, and knit 1. And that is used on a bunch of my patterns. It's just like a nice little decorative stitch. Really pretty Estonian again. And then wanted to show you a centered double increase. So one of the reasons I decided to go back through my patterns was that I called some things in my earlier patterns by different names, and then I like changed tech editors, and so I'm I'm sort of going back and making sure that everything is named correctly. So this one here is centered double increase, and this works really well. So I use this in the middle of my, on like a spine of I'm actually working on this right now. You can see I've stacked my center double increases here, and you can see what nice fabric that makes. It's really dense, so you don't really see like you don't see the make ones in here because that can make it a little bit janky on either side there. So that center double increase looks really nice stacked like that. So for that, you are going to knit through the back loop, yarn over, and then knit through the front loop. And you can see it gives you a point there from which 3 stitches come. So Barb asked, what is the spelling of the name of the shawl? I think you maybe mean Celino. It's Celaeno. So it's pronounced Celino, but the speech to text doesn't know that. So Celaeno. Celaeno. Okay, got it. Okay. Let's see, any other questions? Okay. Does anybody have any questions that you would like me to cover? Anybody? Okay. So we talked about big old yarn overs last week. Got the Estonian flowers and all of that stuff. Um, so next week, let me transition over here. Next week, I'm going to be talking about bind offs. So, with a lot of my shawls, I love doing a really nice knitted on bind off. So it's lacy and beautiful. And it also lets you have that edge be nice and loose. And it's a little bit confusing the first time that you see that because of the way it's constructed. So a knitted on edging is actually knit perpendicular to your shawl body. So it's a little confusing. Like the first time you see that come up in the instructions, it's like, wait a minute, I had 500 stitches on my needles and now like this chart is 20 stitches across. What on earth is going on? So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the crocheted bind off and then crocheted bind off with a knitting needle. It's something that I just kind of invented so that I could like rope knitters in who who maybe didn't want to use a crochet hook. So I'll talk about that. I'll talk about my favorite stretchy bind off. And I will talk about bind offs that might be suitable and might not be suitable. I have a couple of picot bind offs for you. So one of my that I do is like a centered picot bind off and then another picot bind off. So many bind offs to talk about. In lace, casting on and binding off is so important because you want it to be loose enough to be able to stretch it out into its beautiful and like real size and open up all that lace and everything. So lots to talk about with bind offs. Let me see. Marianne said, did you make the shawl pins? Do you mean the shawl pins that I sometimes sell on my site? Is that what if that's what you're talking about? Yes, I make those. So I actually started out my life in the fiber world as a shawl pin and knitting jewelry designer. And I started designing in order to put my shawl pins onto something. So I kind of caught the lace bug, and they kind of slip off my shoulders because I move around a lot. And so I was like, I have to have a pin on my stuff. So I made some shawl pins and kind of jumped into the fiber world, and that's how it all started. So anyway, I don't see any other questions. So if you have questions, please let me know during the week and I will talk about them. And if you need to know how to do something or whatever, I can do a little reel for you over on Instagram. And if you're not following me on Instagram, definitely follow me over there because I have like all sorts of tips and tricks and reels and stuff that I put up. And hopefully that will make your knitting life better. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. And love it that you're here. I love seeing you guys in the chat, and I appreciate you so much. And I will see you again next week. So take good care. Bye bye, everybody.